We're going to take on Bleacher Report, Mr. Zach Buckley, ranking every NBA team's top three offseason trade targets. It's pretty much all 30 teams in the NBA rolling around this offseason. Mr. Buckley's going to go over, his side of things, what he expects for each team to look at, and pretty much I'm going to give my take and see what he covers here. So let's jump it in with Mr. Buckley. Number one, rolling with the Atlanta Hawks. On my side of things, before I go into his article and what he says, and I haven't read this article, I think with the Atlanta Hawks and their situation, Trae Young has had both of his seasons here. He started as an all-star, let alone his first time, which is crazy to see. So kudos to him. But now Trae Young's in a position to where he wants to get out of 20, wins, per year. He wants to rack up at least 40, make the playoffs for next season. I think it's very feasible. I think it's possible that they can rack up a 7th or 8th seed in worst case. But you got to look at their roster. I like their front court with John Hollins and Clint Capella. You have Trae Young as the point guard. They really need to fix out their shooting guard and as well as small forward. You have, with those two positions, I think they should really go after a small forward, a young stud. But really, there's no one in the market to do so or trade for or sign. So it is what it is. They're going to have to roll with DeAndre Hunter at the 3. I think if you're going to make a trade, pretty much as a quick impact, there's not really a true star you compare him with. I think if you look at a direction of Buddy Hield, I think that's more realistic. The Kings would let that go with his contract. I think if you want to go all out, you should contact Phoenix and try to get Devin Booker. You can recreate a Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson vibe when it comes to it. I know Phoenix wouldn't let that happen, so Devin Booker would have to actually request a trade and directly to them and pretty much overload with number one picks. But the Hawks, they have cap space. Who knows? Maybe they'll get a DeMar DeRozan in free agency. I mean, they can go any direction, and plus they have some picks and cap space, so they're chilling. But let's see what he says here. So number one, they have Brandon Ingram sign and trade. That's not going to happen. B.I., he already got his first All-Star appearance. He's good with the Pelicans. He already is excited with him and Zion to take over the league. And he's well aware that being around, was he like 23 years of age, that for the next 6 to 7 seasons, he'll be on the Pelicans with Zion. They're going to take over the league in the Western Conference later in their years. So no, he's not going to request to go to the Atlanta Hawks. Plus, I don't think that'll be a good fit anyways. Spencer Dinwiddie, there's really no need for Spencer Dinwiddie on that team. He'll probably ask for $12 or $15 million. If you can't find a big free agent to sign, you could probably sign him for a one-year deal, if anything, just to flow for the 2021 season. Aaron Holiday, a role player, I don't really expect it. It is what it is, but I like my scenarios I've said instead. Number two, the Boston Celtics. I think the Celtics, they should go for a trade for Steven Adams. I think he'll be a great fit for their team as a true dominant 5. I think that's something they're somewhat lacking. You do have Daniel Tice, as well as, you have Robert Williams. Some of these cats like that, they're young. I just think if you want to take that next step to be a championship contender, not a playoff contender, you can have a starting lineup of Kemba Walker. You can have Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. You're going to have to make some trades and draft picks to send over to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think they'll appreciate letting go Steven Adams of his $27 million. I think he will have 1 year left on his deal. But Sam Presti, he can rack up some more first-round picks. Probably for Steven Adams, you'll probably have to give up. The Celtics have an abundant amount of picks, so they can let go of 2 first-rounders, let alone probably one of the younger cats they have on their team. They'll have the cap space. They can get it done. That's if I'm Boston, because you already have your first 3 positions all good. Jason Tatum, Kemba, and Jaylen Brown. And you really don't need any more offense when it comes to the rest of your starting 5. So if you can rack up Steven Adams more on the defensive side, I think that'll be perfect for them. But let's see what he says here. Number 1, Joel Embiid. 2, John Collins. 3, Patty Mills. You could go that direction with John Collins. I don't expect the Atlanta Hawks to let go of that 22-year-old whatsoever. Joel Embiid, the 76ers are still going to run it out with Ben Simmons and Embiid. Even if you were to trade for Embiid to the Sixers all the way to the Boston Celtics, they're going to have to ask for like a Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, some of these young cats. And if you're Boston, there's no need to let that happen. You already have the chemistry, let alone a great dynamic when it comes to that young core of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and the crew. Uh, you've been to a conference finals, and with Joel Embiid, there's a lot of question marks. The offense is going to be demanded more for him offensively, let alone he is injury prone. So, no, if I'm the Celtics, I shoot for Steven Adams, the 27-year-old. The Brooklyn Nets. So when I see this team, I think they need to let go of their young cats. I'm talking about Spencer Dinwiddie needs to go, Jared Allen, Musa, Joe Harris. I would like to keep Karis LeVert. I'm unsure if Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant want him on the team. And if they're looking for a third star, they may have to include him in a trade. I think the Brooklyn Nets, if they're going to get a third option on their team, it can't be a guard and it can't be an offensive player that's really dominant of the ball. I think they should look at LaMarcus Aldridge. I think that's a perfect fit for them. If they can roll with the starting lineup, for example, and they would have to include a trade. So let's just say, for example, they rolled with Kyrie Irving, Karis LeVert. If not Karis LeVert, if he's including the trade, maybe like a Wesley Matthews, just a 3-and-D shooting guard on a team, or like a Iman Shumpert. Probably not an Iman Shumpert when it comes to them. I'm trying to think of another 3-and-D starting shooting guard they can go with. But we'll leave it at that as of right now. Small forward, Kevin Durant. Power forward, LaMarcus Aldridge. Then you have DeAndre Jordan at the 5. That team screams championship contender coming out of the East. If not LaMarcus Aldridge, listen, the only reason why I said to let go of the young guys and the young cats is because Kyrie Irving's already expressed in different interviews that he never mentioned any of the young cats. He only mentioned, DeAndre Jordan, Kevin Durant, some of the older guys as well. So I just think you need to put a bunch of veterans, 3-and-D shooters, and rough riders on that team. You know, if you can have a bench of like Alan Crabb, pick up Tyson Chandler free agency. I really doubted Joakim Noah. I think a Marcus Morris or Markieff Morris would be perfect as well on that team. You can bring in like a Jonathan Simmons, a DJ Augustine. I think that they could play a rough rider type of team, but it does depend on their coach, who they go with. So they do have Bradley Beal, Oladipo, and Gobert. That's not a bad pick. I think with Rudy Gobert, you could probably make that happen. I know the Jazz, if they do lose in the first round, maybe the second round, they are looking to retool. I don't think they'll let go of Gobert. I know there's been friction between Donovan Mitchell and the center Rudy Gobert based on the corona. I don't know if it's devastated to their relationship at all. But if they are looking to move him, you can bring in Jared Allen in a trade, Karis LeVert, Joe Harris, maybe Spencer Dinwiddie, a pick or so. And I never really thought about that, but that would work out. If you're the Jazz, you would definitely make that happen because you have a young team. And Rudy Gobert has a big contract. He's around 26, 27. And Jared Allen's in his 20s, so I never really thought about that, but that could be electric. But you would have to let go of DeAndre Jordan, and I doubt DeAndre Jordan and the crew, they'll let him go, but who knows. Bradley Beal, I don't think that's realistic. The Wizards wouldn't make that trade, so I don't agree with it, let alone they don't need Bradley Beal because you already have two scorers in KD and Kyrie who are going to dominate and take over the offense and pretty much give you 60 a night at worst case scenario, 55 a night. Oladipo, no, he doesn't fit with that team. The Charlotte Hornets, they're not going to be able to obtain any big free agents in the market. I think best case scenario, since you have a young team of, you have Terry Rozier running as well as Devontae Graham. He had a stellar improved season. You do have your backcourt set. I don't expect them to make the playoffs anyways, let alone have a good future. But, it is what it is. Hopefully you can rack up in the lottery for a top 3 pick. If you can draft a LaMelo Ball or James Wiseman would be huge. I think in a free agency signing, you're not going to get anyone big. If you're going to go for a quote-unquote, good player to be signed, the biggest type would be a Montrezl Harrell. Besides that, there's really no one else. Brandon Ingram sign and trade, that's not going to happen. Christian Wood sign and trade, that's not going to happen. Montrezl Harrell sign and trade. They wouldn't need a sign and trade with Montrezl Harrell because he is unrestricted. So, no. The Chicago Bulls. The Bulls are in a weird position. They need to let go of their coach. He's had friction with Zach LaVine. They never won 2 games in a row this season, which is terrible. They do have a young foundation of Zach LaVine, who's, I'll give him credit, ever since he came from Minnesota to Chicago. He's close to being an all-star. He is close. Larry Markkinen needs to pick it up, but those are a great foundation. You do have Wendell Carter at your center. He's kind of undersized at 6'9", 6'10", or I think 6'9" mostly. You may want to look as James Wiseman if you can find him in the draft. Let alone if you can get LaMelo Ball. Either one of those two would be a huge impact for that team. But they are lacking at a true point guard and center. Small forward, they are running with Otto Porter Jr., who's going to opt in for around $25 million or so. I mean, if they keep him, it is what it is. But if they do have free agency, you got to fill out one of those positions. I don't really know what direction they can go. I think they can't really get any star on their team. I doubt DeMar DeRozan would join that young team. I don't see it to happen. There's really no young studs out there. If anything, go with the role player. Go with Derrick Jones Jr. in free agency to fill out that 3 slot, and then really look to either draft Wiseman or LaMelo Ball when it comes to it. So they have Drew Holiday, Josh Richardson, Mo Bamba. No, Drew Holiday is approaching around 30 years of age. He doesn't make sense for that young team. Josh Richardson, I mean, he would be a backup shooting guard. I mean, it's not really worth it. Mo Bamba, the Orlando Magic's not going to let that happen. So, no, I disagree. The Cleveland Cavaliers. So, with the Cavaliers, they're in a weird spot as well. I've always stated they should have traded Kevin Love back in 2016 after they won the championship. I have no reason. I don't know why they've kept him for the last 4, maybe 5 seasons now. I mean, he's a glorified Ryan Anderson 2.0, and I say that nicely. Very overrated. They need to let him go. Andre Drummond already opted in for 1 more year, so he'll be the biggest star you'll have on your team and franchise. No one else is going to sign with them, so that's a plus in their books. They may, I don't know if they're going to let go of their head coach or not. They're all over the place. Darius Garland needs to come off the bench. They try to run him with Colin Sexton as your backcourt. They're too small at 6'1", and I think 6 foot as well. Colin Sexton, just keep him, run him at the point guard position. They're really going to have to find a 2 on their team, let alone a 3. They're probably going to let go of Tristan Thompson. There's really no one in free agency you can find. You really have to bank on the draft of either LaMelo Ball or let alone if you do have Wiseman, you can just trade him off. I think if they should make a trade, they should look to bring in Andrew Wiggins from the Golden State Warriors. Whenever it comes to it, the Warriors can clear cap space, let alone Andrew Wiggins is 24, 25 years of age, so he can fit in that mold for the Cavaliers. But there's no other young, kind of, not a franchise player, but there's no young cat that they can really bring in with potential. The only trade I could see is Andrew Wiggins, but, I mean, it is what it is. The Cleveland Cavaliers are a mess, and, I mean, that's on them. I'm not even going to mention any of these 3 selections. No. The Dallas Mavericks. Okay, now, if I'm the Mavericks, I need to run Porzingis back to the 4. I would like to bring in DeAndre Jordan. He was a perfect fit with them back in last season. I think if you bring DeAndre Jordan at the 5 or a dominant big, that would be perfect. You would have to make a trade with the Brooklyn Nets. I would try to figure who they would ask for directly, probably some bench pieces. I would have to really look into there. But if you can have a starting lineup of Luka Doncic at the point guard position, you have DeAndre at the center, Kristaps Porzingis at the 4, Dorian Finney-Smith at the 3. Maybe you have to run Tim Hardaway Jr. at the 2. But he's more of a 6-man role, but he's still prospered as a starter. I think that'll be a great starting lineup for their team. They will have some cap space if they let go some of these contracts to be expired. I think they should save to look up for Giannis, the next falling free agency class. There's really no one they can really go for per se when it comes to here. But let's see what they say. So they have Bradley Beal, McCollum, Rudy Gobert. They don't have enough trade assets for Bradley Beal. That's not going to happen. Let alone Luka likes the ball in his hands. They really need to find a 3. If they can find, it doesn't have to be a star player. It can be like a Michael Porter Jr., just a young cat that can be able to handle some of the offense. That's something they really need to look at, let alone a starting center like DeAndre. CJ McCollum, no, I don't agree with that. Rudy Gobert, I mean, that'll be perfect. I mean, that front court would be stupid good, but I don't know whatever it comes to a trade when it comes to it. But Rudy Gobert has a big contract. I don't know if that's going to happen. I will look mostly for DeAndre Jordan. I just like the way he played with the Dallas Mavericks. The Denver Nuggets. Okay, we're racking up here. With the Denver Nuggets, I think what I envision for them, instead of free agent signings, they need to make some trades. I would actually like for them to make a trade to bring Ricky Rubio as your starting point guard. I think that European style play will fit very nicely with Jokic in the team. I think they should move over Jamal Murray to the 2. So you got your backcourt ready set perfectly. You got Jokic at the 5. I got to see how Jokic adjusts his game because he has lost a lot of weight. So we have to see what happens there. He lost 30 pounds. At your power forward position, they're probably going to let Paul Millsap walk. I think he can get paid some money somewhere else. But, I mean, that'll be nice if they can keep him at their 4. We'll see. Or if not him, Jeremy Grant. At the 3 slot, they're probably going to start now Michael Porter Jr. to see how it goes. But I like that starting 5 if they were to keep it the way I kind of mentioned it. But if they're not looking at trades or free agency, there's really no one out there. Maybe a DeMar DeRozan if they want to fill on their 3 slot. Let's see what they see here. So Drew Holiday, the cat from Philadelphia, and Al-Farouq Aminu. No with Drew Holiday. No, I don't agree with that. I mean, they can really go for another role player. They really need that 2 option. At number 3 for Al-Farouq Aminu, you pretty much have Jeremy Grant, who plays pretty much that similar role, who's more lengthier and athletic. So I like the direction I said. The Detroit Pistons. Okay. Man, the Pistons are a mess because they're in the middle of a pact. You're stuck with that Blake Griffin contract, and he can opt into another year in 2022, which he most likely will because no other team's going to pay him over $36 million. So if you're the Pistons, you're probably going to have to run with that Blake Griffin experiment. You're going to have to keep Derrick Rose if that's the case because he's a veteran who wants his minutes. Since you have those 2 as a foundation, you're really going to have to find a 5 for your team. Maybe sign JaVale McGee when it comes to free agency. And then you're really going to have to find a wing player that can score for himself. So you may have to look in free agency to sign DeMar DeRozan. I think that'll be a good fit to what they're trying to do. Besides that, I don't see a future for the team. And whenever it comes to these 3 selections here, draft picks, that's not the case. They already have Blake Griffin, Derrick Rose. They want to get into the playoffs. Plus, you have Dwayne Casey as your coach, so they're not going to try to go that way. John Collins, they don't have enough trade assets to the Atlanta Hawks that they'll budge. Dennis Smith Jr., no, they're not trying to go young. The Golden State Warriors, they're going to be fine. They're going to be back to a top 3 team in the Western Conference. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson are going to be healthy again with Draymond. You have Wiggins. They'll start at the 3. They'll probably run him as a Harrison Barnes role, let alone when he's with the second unit from time to time. He can pretty much pull up from mid-range and have his own ISO offense from time to time. I think they'll be cool with that. At your 5, I think they'll have probably a top 5 pick. If they can get James Wiseman, be perfect. If not, they'll probably just have to sign a center. I really don't know what direction. They're probably going to bring back Bogut. Maybe. There's not a lot of centers they could really, maybe sign Dwight Howard if anything. JaVale McGee they can always bring back. But the Warriors are in a great spot. They really just need to focus on bringing some veterans back on their bench to reach back into the finals. So Giannis Antetokounmpo, so he's not a free agent until 2021. So they have to wait a year from now. But again, they can just save that cap space for him. I guess that's where they're going. John Collins, no. Miles Turner, you could go with Miles Turner. I mean, what are you going to do? Trade Wiggins to the Pacers for him? That's not a good trade at all. Miles Turner's a little soft. I think they just need a dominant center who doesn't need to score the ball. The Houston Rockets. Okay. Wait, did I give my solution for the Warriors here? I think I did. Yeah, you'd pretty much have to look in the draft for a James Wiseman or a big and pretty much save yourself from 2021. That's how I see it for the cap space. The Houston Rockets, they're in a weird position. I don't like their small ball, putting P.J. Tucker at the 5, let alone Robert Covington starting at your 4. Who knows if they're going to re-sign D'Antoni? I think they probably will let him go because his era and juice is out for their momentum of being contenders. I don't know what direction they'll go with the head coach. There was talks at Thibodeau. I don't agree with that based on their game plan. But looking at their roster, I think you should move P.J. Tucker back to the 4. You should look to sign JaVale McGee or like a DeMarcus Cousins at your 5 when it comes to it. Anything besides from that, it's weird because whenever you have a point guard and shooting guard who are your best players who play somewhat similarly ball dominant, you're just too small to be able to win a championship, let alone James Harden's championship days are over with, unless he makes a big move. Or, of course, he's a second option. Miles Turner, Aldridge, Doug McDermott. I think LaMarcus Aldridge would be better in their plans. He can spread the floor out from threes and most likely for mid-range jumpers. So, yeah, I like that pick. The Spurs would make a deal out of it if they get some picks and some young cats. But, yeah, you can have LaMarcus Aldridge at the 5. I would actually be fine with that as well. The Indiana Pacers. With the Pacers, they're in a weird slot. They are really lacking on a small forward. I think if they probably look to make a trade for Gordon Hayward, if you do the Andrew Wiggins trade for Miles Turner and some other stuff in the background, go for that. But if not Andrew Wiggins, go for Gordon Hayward. He's got $30 million left on his contract. You would have to move Miles Turner to the Boston Celtics and probably another bigger contract for that team, maybe like a Doug McDermott and a pick or two. When it comes to it, but that's what the Pacers need. They need a 3 who can score. I do like the cat. What's his name? The small forward, T.J. Warren. I think he's best as a 6 man and off the bench. And hey, I like this here. You got it right. You got Gordon Hayward as number 1. Perfect. I had that same thing. Harrison Barnes, no, he doesn't. He's not that type of player. The Los Angeles Clippers, they just need to re-sign their players. You have Montrezl Harrell. I think you have another player or two. The Clippers don't need to do anything, really. They just need to keep the same team. I think Reggie Jackson will walk because he's on a veteran minimum right now, and he'll get the bag somewhere else. Same thing with Marcus Morris. So you're going to have to fill out for a backup point guard. Look to sign a DJ Augustine. For a power forward that to start with, you may have to bring in the brother Markieff Morris. I think you can be able to get him for $5 million for that role extension. But it is what it is. Point guard Kyle Lowry, Steven Adams, Andre Drummond. You're not going to get Drummond. He already opted in with the Cavaliers. Steven Adams, they don't have enough cap space. Number 1 with Kyle Lowry. I would have to see how they would orchestrate that trade. I'm cool with it, but you already have Patrick Beverly, who's pretty much running that point guard position. Paul George at the 2 and Kawhi at the 3. They're not going to run Paul George at the 3 and Kawhi at the 4. So, no, they're fine where they're at, being close to champions. The Lakers, I think they need to make a trade for Chris Paul. I think you're going to have a bunch of one-year contracts that are going to expire. You have Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, Rondo. Man, there's a couple more contracts in there. KCP, I think they're probably going to let them walk, and let alone, I think the Lakers will win the championship. So I think these players will get their rings. They proved it, and they'll go somewhere else to get paid a little more for the other team. So I think a bunch of cap space will be given to the Lakers for around $20 to $30 million. I think they will probably make a trade for draft picks as well to bring in Chris Paul to complete a big 3 for their team. But when it comes to here, Derrick Rose, I don't like that fit at all. He didn't fit with LeBron in 2018, and LeBron's too ball dominant. Buddy Hield, no, it doesn't mash it. That doesn't even mash as well. Spencer Dinwiddie, that's not a bad pick. He's around 6'5". He could run the point guard, but if you're looking to win a championship in 2021, go with the Chris Paul route. The Memphis Grizzlies, they're in a great position. They're probably going to make the playoffs as the 8th seed. Kudos to John Morant, Rookie of the Year, who's been dominant and electric, explosive, crazy highlights, and he has a bright future ahead of him. So kudos to him. He's going to be like somewhat of a Damian Lillard, but more of an impact player, which is just kind of how I see he plays. I think for their team, you may have to move Valanciunas. You're really going to need a small forward to pair with him, a wing player. And there's this day and age, there's a lot of ball-centric point guards who like the ball in their hands and score as the number 1 option. If you're going to pair them as a number 1 option, you need to bring a small forward that can be able to pull as a second option. I don't really know what's out there. I mean, Larry Markkinen would be fine. I don't see much potential in him continuing being injury-prone. Kevin Huerter, Kyle Kuzma. Yeah, they could probably make a trade for Kyle Kuzma, start him at the 3, because the Lakers are going to most likely want to let him go. He doesn't fit with the direction, but yeah, I mean, the Grizzlies are fine where they're at. The Miami Heat, I know they're looking to make a trade, not make a trade, but to sign Giannis in 2021 with Oladipo. They could make a trade for Bradley Beal. They have different routes they can go. I think if you're anything, you prepare your team for Giannis if you want to win a championship. If there's a deal for Bradley Beal, it's going to be hard to not take it. But then again, you got to think about it. Do you want to let go of Kendrick Nunn? Do you want to let go of Duncan Robinson? Some of these young cats for part of their younger deals to where it's only around 3 to 5 million. I would say keep the team as it is pretty much. If you're going to sign anyone, do a 1-year contract for like a Gallinari or something along those lines, maybe even a Fred VanVleet, and then prepare for Giannis the next offseason, which they should look to do. They could go with Joel Embiid, but Philadelphia, I know they're not going to make a trade for him. But if you're the Sixers, and if you trade on Embiid, they would have to bring in Nunn, Tyler Herro, Duncan Robinson, and that fits better, more of a perfect complementary way with Ben Simmons. So they may bat an eye when it comes to it, but I think the Heat are going to prepare usually for Giannis, but they do have a different direction on it. I'm going to stop the video here, and we'll jump into a part 2. We're going to follow up here with part 2 of the video for Bleacher Report's top 3 targets for each team, jumping into this season, coming into 2021 and approaching the 2020 offseason. So let's jump into it. We're going to follow up here with the Milwaukee Bucks. So how I see the direction for this team, Giannis will win the conference finals. He'll get to the championship in the finals in 2020. I expect them to lose to the Lakers. If not the Lakers, the Clippers. But I think the Lakers will beat them. And that's going to put them in a direction of really retooling. I think when it comes to desperation mode, Giannis is going to have his last contract year. And when it comes to it, you're going to have to make a big move to pretty much secure him. I think if they don't win the championship, let alone get to another finals, Giannis will leave, and he'll probably go to Miami or maybe another franchise, but he won't re-sign with the Bucks. I don't see that to be. I think whenever you're 26 years of age, the pressure's on the wall and writing on the wall to where you're going to be pressured to leave another franchise to a bigger market, let alone I think you have Brook Lopez, George Hill, Wesley Matthews. Some of these, not really. What's the point guard's name? Eric Bledsoe. I think some of those guys would depreciate. Let alone the league will catch up to the Bucks, and their era and time and momentum will pretty much be over with. Kind of like with the 2017 through the 2019 Rockets. I think the same scenario with the Bucks, and I think mentally Giannis would just be done with after seeing like LeBron win a championship or two, or maybe Kevin Durant in 2021. So I think approaching this offseason, they need to make a trade for Chris Paul. Chris Paul will pretty much leave the Thunder after losing in the first or second round, most likely the first round. He's proven his value, let alone it's time for him to hop back into a championship contender. And I think he's the perfect second option to Giannis. They both have their expiring contract years. So if they both lose in the finals or something like that, they pretty much can bounce. And I think this is a great send-off story for both of them. But I think this is the best opportunity and chance you have to take a risk if you're Milwaukee when it comes to it. But if you keep the same team pretty much as it is, there's no free agent you can sign with because you're locked in with the max contract of Giannis, let alone with Chris Middleton from last season. So it is what it is. But, hey, I'm glad they talked about Chris Paul at the number 1. I think that's something that would be perfect for both scenarios and, pretty much what both teams are looking at. And the Bucks, if they do, lose in the finals or the conference finals, they need a star player who's been to, deep in the playoffs, let alone, give them that chance to move forward. So I'm glad we both agree on that part. Let alone with the Pacers with Gordon Hayward. So we're like 2 for 13 right now. Me and the author. The Minnesota Timberwolves. Listen, you can't pair a team with D'Lo and Cat. Whenever Cat's already been on this franchise for 6 seasons or so, the juice has already ran out. The time period's already over with. I think they need to trade D'Lo and Karl-Anthony Towns. I already made a video for this on a rebuild. If you go to one of my videos down, it says rebuilding the Phoenix Suns. This is what I would do. I think it works out for both parties. And you would need a third team. So if you watch the video, I go more in depth on it. There would be a 3-team trade. So you would let go of Karl-Anthony Towns and D'Lo. That time's over with. You want some new blood. You want a new era when it comes to Minnesota. Karl-Anthony Towns cannot be that guy for you to pretty much even make the playoffs as it is. Very talented, but doesn't fit with the team. I would trade those 2 cats, bring them to Phoenix. So kudos to Devin Booker and the crew. They got the trio finally together. What Minnesota would retain is DeAndre Ayton. So you have a franchise player right there as your center. You would obtain a top 3 or top 5 pick from the Minnesota Timberwolves. So this would most likely be like a LaMelo Ball, hopefully, in that scenario. And then with the third team trade, you would actually have Denver Nuggets, you would obtain Michael Porter Jr. So if you can have a scenario of a starting lineup, including the trades, so if you would have, for example, just to start off, it would be a perfect first year for Minnesota. If you're rolling into the 2021 season, you got rid of Cat and D'Lo, but you have a starting five of, for example, LaMelo Ball, Gary Harris, who would be from the Denver Nuggets trade as well, Michael Porter Jr. at your three. Who would be at their four? I forgot who I put. I can't really think of their four, but at the five, you would have DeAndre Ayton. That right there is a great foundation. You would have three cats and Michael Porter Jr., LaMelo Ball, and DeAndre Ayton to start your brand new franchise. And that's perfect because if they don't make the playoffs the first or second season, they're cool with it. They're young. They're getting used to it. But then in the third, fourth season, I think that team will really pick up. But watching that video, I go more in depth, and you can get a visual of it. Aaron Gordon, Porter Jr., Frank Ntilikina. No, those aren't good picks. But they're most likely going to run with D'Lo and Cat for that season. They're probably going to win like 30 games or anything. Even if you do pair Aaron Gordon or someone else, that's no. They're not making the playoffs anyway. There's no way. I don't care who they bring in. I mean, if they bring in like a Bradley Beal, I think that team will be like a 7 seed, but the Western Conference is so loaded with contenders and veteran teams and superstars that it doesn't make sense. The New Orleans Pelicans, they have a great future ahead of them. I mean, a great future. I think them and the Mavericks are going to fight out for a couple of conference finals appearances in the next 4 to 6 years, and they'll take over the West, so kudos to them. They're going to keep Brandon Ingram as a restricted free agent. They will match any offer. They're going to give him his $25 to $30 million for 5 years for each year. Zion's already on the team still. The team's perfect. I think they need to let go of Drew Holiday and Derek Favors. I don't think Favors fits as their starting five. I think Jackson Hayes, I got to check up on him. For 5 months being in quarantine, he needs to pick up and gain more muscle weight. Plus in the offseason as well. I think he should be their starting five. Invest into him. If not him, maybe sign it like a Serge Ibaka at your five. A big presence with Zion. Let go of Drew Holiday. You may have to sign. I can't really think of a 3-and-D shooting guard. Maybe try Josh Hart at the 2. But if you are signing Drew Holiday, maybe you can trade him for a center. I can't really think right now, but they're in a great direction either ways. I would not get Miles Turner on that team. Duncan Robinson would be a nice fit as well. Larry Markkinen. I like Larry Markkinen more at the 4, not the 5, but the Pelicans are good pretty much where they're at. If they can let go of Drew Holiday, let alone Derek Favors can either come off the bench or they can trade him away and you can bring in Jackson Hayes as your starting 5 with invest in him. He needs to get more muscle mass, then perfect. The New York Knicks, not much I'm going to talk about here. They've messed everything up with their head coach as well as signed a bunch of power forwards. They did not invest in Dennis Smith Jr. the right way. They've started Maurice Harkless. I don't know why. They started Taj Gibson, which entering the season, that team had a pretty nice roster if you would have kept the young core group together. If you would have a starting lineup of like Dennis Smith Jr. with R.J. Barrett, Kevin Knox, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson, they should have kept that starting 5, invested in those young cats. I don't know why they brought all those veterans in, but they have the talent, but their formula is terrible. So John Collins, Jarrett Culver, Finney Simmons, I can care less. The Knicks, I don't know what they're going to do. They had talks about bringing Chris Paul. That doesn't make sense for both parties as well. They're just going to have to roll with the young cats. It is what it is. They have cap space, but I can care less with the Knickerbockers. The Oklahoma City Thunder, I think they need to, kudos and congrats to them for going to make the playoffs. I didn't expect to make the playoffs because I thought the Golden State Warriors were going to be healthy. And as well as, I'm forgetting a team, I thought the Pelicans would have been healthy with Zion. But since those two teams are injured, and let alone the Portland Trailblazers had injuries as themselves, that led the doorway to the Thunder. A lot of people didn't really see that logistics and things, but that's how it is. But kudos to them. And so Chris Paul proving once again he is an all-star. And I've always said he's a franchise player. People were just downgrading him after those playoffs with the Warriors and the Rockets in 2019. James Harden pretty much hogged the ball, left Chris Paul as being on the side, pretty much off the ball. So that's Harden's fault. Chris Paul has always been great for that franchise. let alone any franchise. That's why I want him to go to Milwaukee. But if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder on your side of things, for your perspective and advantages, you're going to have to let go of Chris Paul. He had a great run. It was great for the city and the fans to get something since Russell Westbrook's gone with. But now you really need to retool. So, not retool, but rebuild. So if you can let go of CP3 to a contender, bring in some draft picks. Sam Presti has an abundance of those. They're going to have cap space. The Thunder are in a great direction for the future. Plus you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Kudos to him. They may let go of Steven Adams, but I think number one is just draft picks. You're going to have to wait probably 2 to 3 seasons, especially when the West kind of plays out and veteran teams kind of die down. So I like how they put here draft picks. I agree with the same thing. The Orlando Magic. The Magic are kind of like the Pacers. They're in the middle of the pack. I don't see much improvement for them in the future to be. Best case scenario, maybe a 6th or 5th seed in like 3 years. But they're just the middle of the pack. They don't have a true star on their team, let alone superstar. Markelle Fultz he's had a great season. He's progressed in a great way we did not expect at all. So I'm very glad for him. Aaron Gordon I thought he would be a lot better from the past couple of seasons to improve. I haven't seen pretty much any improvement. He's been the same. Jonathan, I think they need to invest in Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz. They'll probably let Evan Fournier walk. He'll probably get paid in free agency, but I just don't know the direction for the Magic. I think you should just go with Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz, who are around 22, 23 years of age. You may have to find a trade package for Aaron Gordon. If not, then let go of Vucevic, Fournier, and DJ Augustine, and you just have to keep going young. That's actually not a bad pick. I didn't really think about that. Zach LaVine. I actually would like that a lot if you would bring in Zach LaVine on the team. Not Blake Griffin or Karis LeVert, but Zach LaVine, especially if the Chicago Bulls don't fire their head coach or do anything to that roster, I would like Zach LaVine on the Magic. That's actually a good pick right there. I mean, their pick would be a second-round exit, but, then again, who's coming to Orlando? The 76ers. Okay, guys, I've stated this in a couple of videos. What I would do is you need to fire Brett Brown. You need to bring in an offensive-centric coach. I got to see who's on the board and who possibly may get fired. But listen, Brett Brown was a great coach defensively, motivational type, but he doesn't know what he's doing offensively for this team. Ben Simmons, you need to pretty much shut him down, humble himself, and move him to the small forward position. He needs to be more of a scorer and driving in. He can still be a point forward, bring up the ball like 30, 40% of the time, but he can't be your dominant point guard 90% of the time. Bring up the ball. He's very predictable. The ball's stagnant. There's really no ball movement unless it's Ben Simmons to a corner three, kind of like a LeBron James system. You need more of a hockey team when it comes to it. So I would look to bring in Ricky Rubio or DJ Augustine as your starting point guard. Have your starting shooting guard. Either try to make a trade for Buddy Hield if necessary, but I don't think they'll have the cap space. If not, look to sign Wesley Matthews for a 2-year deal around $7 million. So if you can have Ricky Rubio or DJ Augustine, starting point guard, you can have Wesley Matthews at the 2, Ben Simmons at the 3, who needs to work on his jumper as well. At the 4, you would be able to have Tobias Harris, 5, Joel Embiid, and I think that team will be championship contender right there. That's just how I see things. They're looking at Drew Holiday. And you could, but it's not really going to get you anywhere to reach that championship level status. So I'm more of a big go big or go home type of GM hat that I'm wearing. So not Drew Holiday. Buddy Hield, if they're still going to run Ben Simmons at the 1, which I foresee them to be, but I want them to move into the 3. But yeah, I would definitely go with Buddy Hield. He needs out of Sacramento. He's 27. He has a big contract. He would fit perfectly with Ben Simmons. Chris Paul, I doubt that Ben Simmons will like that. It would be a great pick for them to really go for a championship. They would make a finals, but I just don't see Ben Simmons and liking that idea. But it is what it is. The cat's young. He wants the ball in his hands. The Phoenix Suns, I think they need to bring in Karl-Anthony Towns and D'Lo. I know a lot of people don't think that's simple. Again, I had that trade. If you go back to one of my videos, rebuilding the Phoenix Suns, I have a 3-team trade with the Wolves, let alone with the Denver Nuggets. That pretty much the Suns would give away DeAndre Ayton. Their first-round pick would probably be top 3 or top 5. Ricky Rubio, Kaminsky. Just watch that video down below. It's probably like 30 videos below this, but it goes more in depth. If you're the Phoenix Suns, you're not making the playoffs. They've gone worse every single season, 5 seasons with Devin Booker. I mean, they may want to run it pretty much the same team, see the progression of DeAndre Ayton. I think with 5 seasons in, Devin Booker is PO'd. He wants to get to the playoffs now. I don't think he can really be your number one option. But if you have D'Lo and Cat on the team, none of them are really a number one option, but they can balance themselves out, if that makes sense. I think you have to go big or go home. But watch that video I do have and see what happens. I know a lot of people are talking about Aaron Gordon. I mean, that would be a cool pick, but they're still not making the playoffs. You got to go big if you're the Suns. If not, Devin Booker's going to request for a trade, especially probably next season, halfway before All-Star break, if they have a terrible record. We're almost done here, guys. The Portland Trail Blazers, I want them to bring back LaMarcus Aldridge. You can go 2 different routes. I've had a video here of rebuilding the Blazers. It's like 3 videos down. You can go 2 different routes. One is you can keep CJ McCollum with Dame, but you can be able to bring in LaMarcus Aldridge as your starting small forward. You can be able to, at your 5, re-sign Hassan Whiteside for bird rights. You can also probably make a trade to get a Gordon Hayward if necessary. They need a small forward 3 that can be able to score. But there's another route to where they would let go of CJ McCollum. They will let go of Nurkic, probably some picks to the Thunder, and the Thunder will give away Chris Paul. You can move Damian Lillard to the 2. Chris Paul at the 1. I know that's unprecedented. I know Damian Lillard would never do that. But then again, he's 30 years old. He missed the playoffs. He needs to be humble. I think he will. And usually when you have all-stars, when they reach 30, they start to get humble. They'll start trying new things like James Harden, like Chris Paul. I think Damian Lillard will probably be in that state to where he may do that, but I think most likely they'll look to bring in LaMarcus Aldridge, if anything. But Ben Simmons, wow, that's wild. That really is crazy. No, the 76ers are going to keep Ben Simmons. No trade will get them entertained, not even for Nurkic with CJ McCollum, and no, that's not happening. No. Even if you're Portland, maybe you can go for Tobias Harris. And yeah, you could maybe, but I'd rather go with the Rudy Gobert's another, it's a fine pick, but if you have CJ McCollum, you'll probably have to trade him for Rudy Gobert, and you're not going to have enough offense, and it's not worth it. I think you need to go with LaMarcus Aldridge. If you can get Chris Paul as well, perfect. And in a lot of scenarios that I'm stating, I know it's not really it could be realistic to where it can max the potential, but there's too many egos in the league, and I just don't see players really conforming to my ideas. But pretty much in my ideas, I think that's the best case for most of these teams. It's all. The Kings, I don't have much to say. They're never going to make the playoffs. You may just want to move to Seattle, to the Supersonics, bring them back, because you can do that externally, but internally with their roster, you're not going to make the playoffs. I don't care what moves they make. You really have De'Aaron Fox out there by himself, who's a young star. So you gotta spotlight him. He's got to be your box office player. But I mean, when you have a starting lineup of him, Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield, Bogdanovich, some other cats like that, it's not enough, especially with Luke Walton. But yeah, they can go the route of a Michael Porter Jr. I would like that as well, as a young stud who can be on the team as a 3. Again, you have a star point guard. You need a second option to be a wing player who can handle offense. So I like that pick. I think they should really look into moving into Seattle, bring back the Supersonics, so people can be fine with them being bad for another 2-3 seasons, because it's fun energy. They moved to Seattle. They could go with Kyle Kuzma and Jared Allen. Those would be, if they can get 2 of those cats, if they can get Jared Allen with either Kuzma or Michael Porter Jr., that'd be great for that team. But you're definitely going to have to wait 3 to 4 seasons even to justify trying to make the playoffs. The Spurs, Popovich is probably going to retire. DeMar DeRozan is going to opt out. LaMarcus Aldridge has 1 year left on his deal. He's going to demand a trade. They'll probably let him go in the offseason. So I think they should trade him to the Portland Trail Blazers. If you're the Spurs, if you can get back like a CJ McCollum, I don't really agree with that, because the Spurs are very young with Derek Wright, Dejounte Murray, and the crew. You may want to trade, LaMarcus Aldridge to the Nets and get back like a Jarrett Allen and some of these younger cats. Besides that, draft picks is the way to go. I really don't know what the Spurs. I mean, the Western Conference is very loaded. They're going to have to wait for another 3 to 5 seasons. It is what it is. The Toronto Raptors, I think they should really look at DeMar DeRozan. I think you do have Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol, and Fran VanVleet. Their contracts are expiring as unrestricted free agents. If you're going to keep that still championship contending team core, you would have to bring them back probably for one more season and bring in DeMar DeRozan. If you just want to go in a completely new direction with Isaiah Jokic going young, you would just build off Pascal Siakam, Fran VanVleet, and OG Anunoby. But there's two different scenarios. But they are targeting Giannis Antetokounmpo 2021. So again, just sign Serge Ibaka, Fran VanVleet. Well, Fran VanVleet for probably a longer contract, but for Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol, maybe one more season. See how they play off. If they do sign DeMar DeRozan or something like that, or if they don't, then they lose in the second round or something, then you can go for Giannis. But yeah, I think two scenarios like that. The Utah Jazz, I think this is the last one. They're in a weird spot. You definitely need to retool with Donovan Mitchell. I think they need to trade and bring back Ricky Rubio. It's a shame that they let him go. He was a perfect point guard for the team. They need to bring back Gordon Hayward as well. They're really lacking on a wing player who can be able to handle the offense. They don't need an all-star player, but Gordon Hayward's always been a borderline all-star. I think he had one all-star appearance back like 3 years ago, 2016 or something. But yeah, they need to bring back Gordon Hayward, and they do have enough cap space if they can be able to bring in LaMarcus Aldridge. If they're trying to go big, and I think they can, it's possible. You would have a starting lineup of Rubio, Donovan Mitchell, Gordon Hayward, LaMarcus Aldridge, as well as Rudy Gobert. But if they want to get someone a little more cheaper, you can actually, instead of getting LaMarcus Aldridge in a trade, you can probably sign either maybe a Serge Ibaka. I doubt that. I think he'll get more money. But maybe, what's the cat's name from Denver, the power forward? I can't think right now. I just went lost. Paul Millsap, yeah. I think Paul Millsap, if you get him for like $10 million, he may budge. I don't see any other team overpaying for him, but that'll be a good direction when it comes to them. Kevin Love is not the way to go. Blanchka, he's a role player. Zach Collins, no. Last team, the Washington Wizards. I think there's two different scenarios. You can blow it up with John Wall, Bradley Beal, or you can keep him for one more season, build the trade value for John Wall, which they're probably going to do. So if that's the case, John Wall, Bradley Beal, run for one more season, see what happens at the All-Star break, if they have a winning record or not. You can determine to trade both of them off, or as well as try to make one playoff run, if anything. You would definitely need to bring a third option within that team who most likely could be a small forward. I mean, a Gordon Hayward would be nice for them. If not him, you may have to sign a Paul Millsap, maybe a Galo Gallinari. But the team's all over the place. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows if Scott Brooks will stay there? But again, they can always make a trade, and they can just go young, bring in the Heat, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn, some of these younger cats like that. But who knows what it is? That's where we're going to stop here with this article. But that's how I kind of see the different scenarios for these different franchises and teams. Those are my trade targets, and as well as not trade targets, but free agency signings as well. But yeah, logging off.